Hello everybody, today I thought we'd take a look at this really interesting internal filter I picked up off of Amazon. As you know, I like reviewing this kind of stuff. This particular internal filter has a bit of a weird addition to it, which you don't see very often in aquarium internal filtration. So let's have a look at it. Got to admit, I've been eyeing this one up for a while on Amazon, and I thought it was about the right time I bought it, because it's got an interesting feature, as I mentioned. This particular aquarium filter has a UV built into it, which, although it isn't something that is new, it is something that you don't see very often. You can see here I've got the HCF 712 with a 6 watt UV, which is actually quite powerful. That 6 watt is actually something you might see on something like a pond filter. So having it in an internal fish tank filter is quite the novelty. Now here's all the bits and pieces. You can read them if you want to. I'm just going to get stuck straight into here. It does say that you can use it on freshwater and seawater only. So if you're going to be using this on brackish, estuarine water, you are out of luck, I'm afraid. You're not allowed to. I haven't opened it as normal, so we'll open it up together and see if this filter is actually any good. Wonderful. Right, let's see what is inside. It's quite a big filter actually, from the box size at least. I didn't actually expect it to be so large. So straight away we've got a bit of airline. We have got the spray bar and other attachments. A UK plug, which is nice. Obviously I'm in the UK. I ordered from Amazon.co.uk, so I get a UK plug. I imagine if you order from another Amazon site, you'll probably get the right plug for your region. And that's it, with an instruction manual. Briefly, that is a very brief instruction manual. Tells you how to install it and a bit of maintenance. That's got to be one of the smallest instruction manuals I've ever seen. But what more do you need? And only in English as well, so maybe they don't do other countries. Taking the filter out, that is quite large. That is quite large. I'd say that's probably about a foot in length. In fact, let's have a look. Oh, I'm not far off actually. Almost a foot in length, 29 centimetres, so not bad eyeballing. Obviously, the model I've got is the mid-range one, so there is one smaller and there are two bigger, so I guess they get extremely long at the end of the day. It's not particularly nice looking, is it? It's just a big black cylinder, but that's okay. So you can see here the basically the sticker on it. It does have a CE mark. Now I've actually recently learned that this can either be the European sort of certification, or it could just mean Chinese export, because it does say made in China. I don't know which one this is. There is a way of telling, maybe someone can tell me. IP68, which you'd hope, because it's going to go in some water. The head is only half a metre, so it's not that powerful, and it's 500 litres an hour, so it's not for a huge aquarium, but maybe up to 100 litres or so. It doesn't actually say on the box what aquarium size it's suitable for, but I like to have about 5 times turnover, so you know, 500 litres an hour, it's a 100 litre tank, isn't it? Let's actually look at the filter itself. I've already mentioned it is pretty ugly, but a lot of internal filters are. Starting at the bottom, we've got our intake. I like to have the intakes at the bottom because it means that the water actually flows all the way through your media, or in this case media, I assume there's media in there, I haven't opened it. Sometimes on other filters you'll see that there's lines and intakes all the way up the filter itself, which means that the water can actually bypass your media quite easily. It just goes up to the closest area to the motor and bypasses the rest of it. So only having it on the bottom is actually a really good feature that a lot of people don't notice. How do we open it? I don't know. I haven't read the instructions. I've just twisted and the bottom comes off. We can see the start of our UV here. I'll twist it again. It does come apart really nicely. You can see there is actually a good amount of sponge in there. Not loads, it's quite coarse. I'd say it's probably a medium actually, not a fine, it's not a coarse, it's probably a medium sponge. But that's quite easy to maintain. The problem, actually no, there is no problem. I was going to say the problem is it will just bypass the media and go via the UV. That's an interesting thought actually. How is the UV doing anything if it's surrounded by sponge? I guess you'll get some water flow over it, but it can't just bypass the sponge because this is solid in the middle, so it does actually have to pass through some media, which is good. I won't touch the UV bulb because if you get grease on a UV bulb, there are issues, although I can see there are fingerprints on this UV bulb, so I would probably give this a good clean before you use it if you do buy one of these, because grease on a UV bulb can cause the bulb to shatter sometimes, so I have to give it a good clean. But normally you wouldn't touch them. It's probably the installation process. It does. I'm really happy with the way it comes apart just by twisting. It's really nice and quite satisfying. Some filters you have to squeeze things to get them apart, and it can be quite awkward. So a little bit more sponge. This obviously hasn't been installed very well because it's a bit broken, a bit bent, but I'm assuming it will do the job. Put it back in there, and then we have the UV bulb itself. That is a massive UV bulb, isn't it? That is huge, but you can see it's actually surrounded by a sleeve, which is good, and inside we have the bulb itself. One thing I am questioning, if I can take this apart without breaking, I'm going to have to touch it. Normally what I'd do is I'd wear a glove or something, but in this case you'll have to forgive me. I'm just going to touch the quartz sleeve. I'm assuming it's quartz. It'll have to be quartz for the UV to work. So it just unscrews and the sleeve comes off. I'm not too worried about the sleeve getting fingerprints on it, but yeah, I'll give it a clean afterwards. So one thing I've noticed here is the possibility of getting spare bulbs. I don't know how common this UV bulb is. It's not one that I recognise from selling pond filters, especially with the 4 pins. From my recollection, bulbs like this tend to have 2 pins, but I might be completely off the mark. So I would question the availability of these bulbs as a replacement part. You should change them every year, if not more frequently. However, the company that makes these might sell these as a replacement anyway, so that's fine. Just be wary of that when you do purchase, or if you do purchase one of these bulbs may not be available. It does happen, so I'll just put that back in. It is actually quite easy to replace that. That's quite nice. We've obviously got a little bit of a trying to drop this gasket here to protect water ingress into the bulb, which is another point of failure for UVs. That might be a reason why you don't see UVs on aquarium filters that often, simply because they have another point of failure, which is this. And also they are something that people struggle to replace a lot of the time, especially in ponds. What I like to always know how to do is access the impeller. It's not very intuitive to access this until you know how to do it. I've been fiddling with this, trying to pull this bottom section off, work out how to get it. You can see here, this latch, you just twist it round so it gets this gap here, and the top will pop off, and you can access the impeller. That is a good, but also a bad feature. I'll explain why in a minute. The impeller is pretty simple. I guess that's hopefully stainless steel, and it goes into the centre of that. Pretty standard, bit of rubber down there to hold it in place and stop vibrations. These impellers are very, very common, very, very standard. You should be able to find replacements for these really easily. Now, why is that a bad way of taking off your top case there? Well, it's kind of annoying, because if you want to put your filter there, for instance, it's fine blowing that way, it's fine blowing forward, and it's fine blowing almost all the way that way, but as soon as you do that, the top pops off, which I think is a bit of a design flaw, because that's not very user friendly. I can assume some people who aren't as familiar with filters as I am might find that a bit annoying, accidentally popping the top off all the time. Don't know if I'm being overcritical, but I don't really like that. I'll put it all back together and then we'll have a look at the rest of the bits. So all back together now, and I think the ease of dismantling that and putting it back together is really nice. It's actually quite satisfying to do. It all just twists back together. That design is excellent, because as I mentioned before, some filters you have to squeeze the sides together to release little clips. Really hard to do sometimes, especially when they get a bit sticky, slimy with algae and stuff. It can be quite challenging, and they tend to harden up over time as well, become really quite stiff. This twist action, really quite pleasant, so I enjoyed that. So the other bits you get in here is like a spray bar and a Venturi system. So the spray bar is pretty standard. It just basically means the water comes out of lots of little holes rather than straight out of the front, and it's just a way of reducing the flow essentially. It can stop your fish getting blown around. If you've got fish that don't like getting blown around, for instance, then, you know, like a betta fish or something, then you can just use the spray bar a bit like that. So that just goes in there, you can imagine it. You can even raise it above the surface as well, so it trickles in like a little waterfall, and that allows you to get more oxygenation as well. So it's just a way of either reducing the flow or getting more oxygen in your aquarium. Quite useful things to have. I love these things. You don't have to use it though. The other option, well, there's three options actually. So you can just leave it like this, which is fine. The other option is using this here, which is your Venturi system. Just worked out what this actually is. It's your flow adjuster. It doesn't actually say which way is oh well, if we take it apart there we can see. So it's just a little valve basically, so when it's straight on pointing at max, it's going to be fully open, and then when you have it sideways, that valve is going to be closed, turns it off completely. There we go, we work it out as we go along. So this allows you to use a Venturi. A Venturi is something I never use, but what it is essentially a bit of pipe. You attach the pipe onto that airline, you can see there, onto that airline, and then you affix this somewhere outside of the aquarium, and as the water flows through there, drags oxygen in and it creates those bubbles. So if you were using this on a heavily populated tank, then you might want to use the Venturi, add a bit of oxygen to your aquarium, because oxygen does tend to get used up in aquariums with lots of fish in. So they're useful things to have. I personally just use the spray bar if I was going to be doing that, but Venturis, lots of people rate them as well, so just a personal preference. In terms of mounting this to your aquarium, there's only one option. You use these suction pads. There are three. They go here, here and here, and then you stick it to your aquarium glass essentially. That is the only way, so that's what you do. So what do I think about this filter in its entirety? Well, firstly, it's pretty ugly, but I think that's just down to necessity. Black's fine, you can hide black quite easily. The reason it's so long is because we obviously need space for the UV to go into. I think the sponge is fine. It's no more or less than you're getting in a similar internal aquarium filter. It does always surprise me how little media you get in filters for aquariums, which is why a lot of people struggle. I'm more used to using canister filters, which has a huge capacity of media, so I wouldn't really rely on this for doing much biological filtration. This is probably more for mechanical filtration, getting debris out using those sponges, and also for water clarification. I'm assuming this is just for clarification. I don't know if the water flow would reduce parasites as well, because that's another use for a UV, is to reduce things like white spot. I can't tell you whether it would do that. It's not something that I don't even think it's something that it advertises on the box. Just says, well, it says sterilization here and algae removal, so they are saying it will remove parasites like white spot and stuff from your water. Who knows though, they might just put that on the box to make it look good. Algae removal is something that it probably would do. So what people are saying on Amazon from their reviews, with pictures as well, is that their aquarium is green, had green water, they add this and their water goes clear. So there is evidence to suggest that this does help with algae removal and water clarification, which is nice, which is probably why you'd be looking at this product. If you've got green water, this most certainly will probably help that. With parasites, I can't tell you whether or not that will work. The big problem is though, if you're buying this because your aquarium has gone green, then the issue is actually more likely with your aquarium. So we're looking at the stocking levels of your aquarium, your feeding regime, your water change regime. Your tank might not be big enough for the amount of fish or the size of the fish in your aquarium. So although this product will probably help with your green water problem, this isn't the solution to your green water problem, really. The solution is actually balancing your aquarium to make your aquarium suitable for its inhabitants. So either getting a bigger aquarium, reducing the number of inhabitants, maybe adding a bigger filter, maybe an external canister filter to add more biological filtration, stuff like that. So although this can help, I wouldn't say that this is, you know, the solution. If you've got that problem, I'd start looking into other things that are causing the green water. But you could use this in addition to help with your green water problem. Does that make sense? I hope so. So overall, I do think this is a good product. I like the fact there's only holes at the bottom. I like the media. I like the ease of removal of all the parts. I think accessibility into the filter is really good. It's really easy to set up, and it's pretty obvious how it works and how to use it. So overall, pretty decent. Thumbs up from me, I think, for this product. Very, very good. But take on board what I've said about your green water problem. There's probably more going on than just needing this filter. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave a like and also subscribe. If you made it to the end of the video, I love you. You're my favourite person on this planet. Once again, thanks for watching and happy fish keeping.